Awesome. For everyone that's joining, thank you so much for being here today. This is our Live with Local series that's a part of our Book to Action program, which is a grant that was brought to us by the California Center for the Book. Um, the whole grant project was kind of inspired by the Bobcat Fire and wanting to take better care of our home, city of Monrovia, in light of that. And so, what a better person to be talking to today than Monrovia's Fire Chief, Chief Dover. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this interview. It's going to be awesome to get a chance to talk with you.
That's my pleasure.
Um, yeah, so we're going to jump into some questions, but at the end, we are also going to have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions that you guys think of throughout, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and I will be sure to ask them. So we'll go ahead and get started with our very first question. We're going to dive right into the Bobcat Fire. Tell us about your experience with the Bobcat Fire and how it compares to other wildfires that you've seen.
Sure. So the Bobcat Fire, as far as a wildland fire, probably very similar in characteristics to many we've seen throughout the state. This particular fire did not have a lot of wind. It did take a lot of acreage. It's about 115,000 acres. So just to put that in perspective, I think that's about 190 square miles. So like I always tell our firefighters, if you took a square mile and drove all the way to San Diego, you'd keep going quite a ways. So quite
Wow.
a large amount of land. We were very fortunate in the way that there was some predicted winds early on, and we ran some modeling, predictive modeling, actually out of a group of scientists helps us from UC San Diego. So we ran some modeling, and those looked pretty bad if we have got those winds for our community. The way they run those is with unmitigated action, so without firefighting actions, a lot of devastation of homes. So fortunately, we didn't have that. We also had a lot of aerial operation, ground operations that were helping us, and so that helped as well. Some key differences for us with this particular wildfire compared to others is it affected our home city and a big part of our home city, as you know. And so for that, a lot of things happened that normally wouldn't happen. Normally, if we get sent out throughout the state or to help a neighbor, it's more operational. We get an assignment, we do that assignment, and then from there, once it's completed, we either go on to something else or we return to home. That could be several hours to weeks. This one, because we were one of the cities that was affected, I was one of the what they call unified commanders, and so everybody that's involved has a seat at the table. So it was us, the Forest Service, their chief, LA County, Arcadia, Sierra Madre, and some of the other chiefs. And what that does is it puts the decision making into a group setting and collaboration, and so that actually helps all of us, vie for our own communities and interests. But it also puts financial responsibility on the city, and so there's a balance of that. And actually, even this week, a lot of what I was dealing with is still some of the recovery with FEMA and trying to get reimbursement for that. So that was one key difference, is our investment in being able to actually help make decisions early on and throughout the incident. And I think we were in unified command for probably about 16 days. So it was a long, sustained time. And then for our firefighters, the difference is we canceled all vacations. We actually had a couple that were actually injured. They got cleared to come back early. And I mean, can't speak enough for our staff that actually helped. I mean, everybody said, hey, we want to help. One of the firefighters' wives was actually involved in a traffic accident, and he ran home, took care of her, made sure she was okay, came back, and just kept working. So very different from that perspective of the entire department was staffing every piece of equipment we had 24 hours a day for weeks. And so very, very different because this is our community. This is what we, are here to protect, and our citizens. And so the investment was a lot higher. So.
Yeah, and I totally echo the sentiment about, so many people wanting to just to help and be supportive. I remember being one of the people that would work the call center over at Community Services. And, we saw the dedication of the fire department and all of the other agencies involved just in the updates that we would get. And then the community just had this huge outpouring. A lot of the calls that we would get were folks wanting to volunteer. Can we buy water for people? What can we do? which is just, just so characteristic of Monrovia to me, which actually kind of relates to my next question. How does the fire department prepare for wildfire season, and how can the community support that preparation? I think some of us might be experiencing a little nerves as we get closer to that season.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, so there's probably two halves to this question. The first is the easy one. The community doesn't really have to help us on the training aspect, but right now we're doing some really thorough training. Part of it is required. We do it every year, and we have a refresher called RT 130, and so it's a required refresher with different elements to it to make sure we understand all of the command elements of a wildfire. There are safety words and actions and things that we follow, guidelines, all of those get reviewed. We have what's called a fire shelter, and it's actually essentially like tinfoil, and we go through and we try never to deploy it, but it's a required thing because of some previous fatalities that we have to have on us at all times during a brush or wildland fire. So we go through training. There's a whole method to getting that on, because a lot of times when you're doing that, it's in high winds, and to get that on quickly and safely and while you're usually running from the fire. So we go through that. This year we've added some other elements to it. So we'll be up in Canyon Park. Actually, we're doing that right now, where we're doing not just our city, but other cities, where we're actually working with them and doing hose lays and just some of these different things that we would normally be doing during a brush fire, practicing radio communications, things like that. So that part's really easy. That's what actually is our part that's important. But as far as the community goes, we have about 1,500 homes in our very high fire severity zone. And so we inspect those every year. So the preparation for them, they all get a letter every year from me, and then some actions that they need to take. And most of those actions really focus on defensible space, that space of cutting brush around their homes. But one thing that really we've focused on in the last couple of years, even at a level with the state this year, they're giving some grants away, is hardening your home. And that's looking at anything from non-cost options to like fixing cracks and little holes in your attic space so embers don't get in there during a fire, to changing your windows, skylights, things like that. So we have some of that information on our website. We have those pamphlets available at our headquarters fire station. And those are things that people can do as well. The other thing is we have a community wildfire protection plan that's on our website, and it shows probably about 50 projects that we're working on. And so there's ways to get involved with some of those projects as well, some community projects, but those are things that we work on throughout the year. So the community can support us in that way as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's something I think that we can do here at the library is, as a part of Book to Action, we can maybe take some of those links and share them out with the public, and just try to increase that awareness. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and something that when we were speaking the other day, I had told you about a group. It's a nonprofit. It's called the Institute for Business and Home Safety, and they actually really try and study the effects of certain disasters, wildfire being one of them, some hurricanes and things like that. But they have some really, really incredible videos. They have an amazing lab. I would love to visit this lab. It's really it's gigantic. And I can't remember how many of these fans they have. I think it's like 500 that are able to recreate hurricane winds or these high level winds and fires. So they'll build a house, roll it into this giant factory, and see what happens. And this is the stuff that we see even at the ground level. So I remember being in Santa Barbara, where we're working on one house fire a number of years ago, and our engineer, he actually sees a wisp of smoke at the neighbor's house. Well, he runs over there, and what it was quite simply was just a plastic chair next to a house with leaves on it that got an ember, but he caught it early enough to be able to move it from the house. And that's one of the key things in these is such simple actions like moving something like that away from a home. Because if we weren't there, he didn't happen to see that. By the time somebody would have caught it, it would have been flaming and maybe get into the attic, and then the house is lost, just for something really simple. But that website has some of how simple these things that are around houses actually can really start and ignite houses. That's the most important zone, is that 0 to 5 feet of what you have around your house.
Yeah, and that just blows my mind to know that it's just, some brush, some leaves on a chair. That's so simple.
Yeah, or a doormat, like a wicker doormat. Such simple things.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's actually something the state is actually coming out with new regulations that we won't see probably enforcement. And our
Okay.
residents are really good; they won't see a huge change, but we're really going to focus. I
Hmm.
think it's in 2023 on that first
Yeah.
5 feet. It's a lot of it's new homes, but some of
Yeah.
it'll be retroactive and it'll just be moving stuff away. So pretty simple actions actually.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so great. Book to Action is, the title of this grant program, and a lot of what, we're really trying to encourage people to do is just take those small daily actions, and we can really see how big of a difference they can make. And, just moving that chair, could prevent, a major
Yeah,
major fire.
yeah,
So
yep.
that's incredible. That really, blew my mind when you first shared that with me when we spoke earlier this week. So. Um, yeah, and so we'll go ahead and move on to the next question, which kind of touches on, what you shared about a lot of your experience with wildfires, where oftentimes it's, um, firefighters being sent to other cities. So how common is it for, California fire departments to send firefighters to help other cities, since we're kind of, California is known for its wildfires? And what is that experience like for you and for the firefighters in particular that are being sent, up and down the state? It's what seems to be every year.
Yeah, it definitely is every year. It's something I think that we just don't really think too much about. It's the structure has been master mutual aid is what it's called, and that's being able to
Yeah.
share resources with each other in a structure where there's not a whole lot of thought down at the ground level when an engine gets dispatched or a resource gets dispatched. Um,
Mhm.
but what happens is on the backside is a fire or something happens. Doesn't have to be a fire, but that's most common. So let's just say a wildfire happens, jurisdictions overwhelmed, they need help, they go to their regional level, that gets kicked up to the state level. There's a north and a south operations center that really understands what resources are available, and they're able to push those resources back and forth as part of this mutual aid system. And so we very seamlessly can move back and forth throughout the state. And so it's super common. Our city, we're
Yeah.
fairly small, out probably under a chief officer or some single resources. And so during the summer months, we've already seen, we were just in at the, I forgot the name of the fire last week for about a day and a half up in LA County. And you can see just
Yeah.
as it starts warming up, this trend to start moving our resources around. So for us, we
Yeah.
already designate who's going to go. They go into a computer system every day, whether they're available or not, because sometimes
Mhm.
we just don't have, some mechanical issues or too many people are on vacation, et cetera. So and then once they're in the system, they just go. And then they're part
Yeah.
of this standardized response. Same thing happened with the Bobcat, all the paperwork, everything is standard. And then on the backside, there's already a pre-designated payment system, which is key because then we can get reimbursed for helping out. When they help out, that's what I'm doing with FEMA right now. For the
Mhm.
Bobcat is still making those payments to those cities. So it's
Yeah.
very seamless. There's improvements happening right now to that system to make sure there's not too much of a delay when there's a request, because that can be a little bit cumbersome as well. And then one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is what's called pre-positioning of resources. So that's very popular, and it's really taking resources. There's some criteria that a local area, if they're going to have a wind event, a red flag warning, they can actually
Mhm.
fill out, go through this with the state with Cal OES, and if they get
Mhm.
approved, resources will be pushed into that area. So Bobcat Fire, we had a lot of resources already available, kind of staged just in case. And of course it happened.
Yeah.
And then we don't
Mhm.
have to wait, 4 to 6 hours for those resources to get to us. So it does make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine, you sharing a little bit about how the wind conditions can just change things so quickly. Like,
Yeah.
that 4 to 6 hours, I imagine, can make such a huge difference when you're in the middle of something
Yeah, especially
like
when
that.
it's an event that's really fast moving, that's not just dominated by fuel burning, but where you actually have wind pushing it, because then the spread can be really, really fast. And so that's when having those resources early on really, really help.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Um, and so this has kind of got me thinking a little bit now about, prevention, which is some of what we're kind of talking about in Book to Action. What can we do to help, take care of the planet now to help prevent, future wildfires or future natural disasters, and really just take care of, our home. And so some of what's come up in our conversation and learning about how to do that is, prescribed burning practices. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that, and if that's something that's on the state's radar. Can we expect to see more of that? Anything that you would have to share?
Yeah, for sure. So the prescribed burning definitely does happen every year. As a whole, the state actually, I don't remember the exact number. I think it's about 60,000 acres. I could be wrong. It's relatively small. We see it locally in our foothills. We know about it. Most people don't. And it's really, unless you knew where to look, you'd see maybe a little wisp of smoke, little patches of brush or being burned off. But you will definitely see a lot more of that this year. The state and the governor have actually dedicated quite a bit of funding. Usually it's about 75 million. Now it's about 750 million is what the final number is to home hardening, to actually some of this prescribed burning, really just all the actions. It's a multi-pronged approach to wildfire mitigation. So that's definitely one of the things that you'll see more of. And to put it in perspective of some of the other states that maybe have a wildfire problem, but less, like in the South or in the East, Florida and Georgia, they burn prescribed burns nearly 1 million acres a year. So I think that's something that we've been relatively conservative within the state, and you'll probably see that as just one approach, because it's not helpful in all areas, but in some areas you'll see a little bit of that occur, or some of that occurring more often.
Yeah.
As one approach. There's I mean, some thinning, and it just depends on what type of fuels they're dealing with. Obviously, building houses, there's about 2 million houses, I think, somewhere in that realm in the WUI, or what we call the wildland urban interface in California. So it's pretty high number of homes, and it's going to continue to grow. So these mitigation actions are going to be a lot more important as we go forward, and especially as we've seen the fire season, and every year it just seems like another historic fire season. The last 10 years, 15 years have been huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we were so looking forward to talking to you about this, and why felt so passionate about making this our project for Book to Actions, because, if you live in California, this is something that we all experience and kind of go through together. And I think there's a sense of community in the heartbreak that people go through because of the wildfires, and just, the fear that we all experience. So it makes me hopeful to hear that, there's more funding going into this, and that there's, some new measures that are not new, but maybe some additional, measures will be taken to kind of, take care of our, beautiful state. So that's, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there's definitely a balanced approach. And I think, one, it's investment. There's a lot of dollars that are going to be spent this year to actually help with the problem, and I think everybody can see that the consequences of not actually performing. Really, the response should be the last thing, but it seems like that's where we're putting a lot of effort, is into the response side of it. And in our community, we're very well prepared. But we also have a lot of homes at risk, and we also have a lot of very volatile fuel. We just were very lucky that we didn't get wind with this, because that would have devastated our community. I mean, personally, obviously, that would have been a heartbreak for all of the residents that lose their homes, maybe pets, their lives. But then there's the economic loss to the city. And that's a whole nother area that is really group that's paying a lot of attention, is the insurance companies these days. And so I talk with insurance underwriters quite a bit, and homeowners quite a bit, and they're tired of the losses too. So there's definitely a lot of pressure and a lot of focus on wildfire mitigation, which is really, really good, because talking about it and getting people to take actions is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we're having this part of the conversation too, related to, the loss of wildlife as well. That kind of came up a little bit when we spoke with Eugene a few weeks ago from Canyon Park. So it's just so multi-layered. It affects us in so many different ways. And I remember how scary that was to be in the middle of a pandemic, and then this fire comes along, and then just being so grateful to all of everybody that worked on that. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for just taking care of the city and its residents. So
Yeah, and actually, I didn't
yeah.
say this after the first question, but an important part was not just the fire department response, but we had our emergency operations center going 24/7 for several weeks. I
Mm,
mean, this wasn't a 1 or 2 day incident. This was several
yeah.
weeks of sustained work. And so it was all city staff, our law enforcement partners. I know you said you're working. I know community services was a big part of this. So
Mm,
it was a huge lift, but alongside probably the best, I was asked this at that time, probably one of the best things that actually happened out of that was just the community's response, and their support was just
mm,
amazing. So it
yeah.
was just such a time where, although it was devastating to the community, we didn't lose any homes, we didn't lose any
Mm,
residents, and so for that I'm very thankful. But it also brought the community very close together, and now we're looking at the road forward, and that's going to be slow progress with opening some of the parks. Hillside
yeah.
Wilderness Preserve is open, so that's good. So
Yeah.
we're getting there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's feel good. It's feels very hopeful. So, which is awesome. And then I just have one last question for you before we kind of move on to Q&A. Back to that action idea, book to action. Does the fire department have any current or upcoming volunteer opportunities that folks can expect to get involved?
Yeah, probably the two big volunteer opportunities. If you're looking for a career in the fire service, we do have our people that have gone to a academy. They actually volunteer, and a lot of those, I was actually one of them. We actually end up hiring full time out of that program. It's a fire cadet
Yeah.
program. But for most of the community, they're not interested in that. They just want to help. And we have what's called a Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, and they're super active. Actually think they're working, oh, it was last weekend with MAP, I think they were working. They say it's a great diverse group of young and old members of the community. Some just get the training. It's 21 hours of training, and it is basically trains you how to be self-sufficient, recognize some
Mhm.
hazards around your house, your neighborhood. But for those that actually want to go on and be part of a formalized team,
Mhm.
then we do a simple background and they become part of the team, and we have all sorts of actions. So they actually were working in the Bobcat, doing some logistical support with our
Mhm.
firefighters. They were working in the EOC. After the fish fire in 2016, they were deployed to do some traffic control over in Duarte. So they're very, very active. So if somebody
Yeah.
wants to log on to the City of Monrovia's fire department website, you can get more information about CERT there. Come by the fire station, the headquarters, we'll give you information. And so we didn't do any classes during the pandemic, but we definitely will
Mhm.
have some coming up, and it's super popular program, but it's a great way to be involved.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I learned a lot, and let's see what kind of questions we might have from the community. I'm going to check the questions feature. Okay, let's see. Is there anybody? If you have any questions at this time and you're on the call with us, feel free to go ahead and type them out in the chat. I have one here that's asking, oh, it looks like someone is asking about the new ladder truck that the fire department has. They're wondering when that might be going into service.
Yeah, so it has been in service a little bit with some of our initial firefighters that were trained, and right now it's actually back getting a little bit of warranty service done. Probably be back in the next couple weeks, and you'll see it around town. So it's ready to go. It's actually supposed to have already been into service every day, but now it's a little bit intermittent until we get a couple more firefighters trained. So
Yeah.
definitely in the next probably sometime in May for sure, because it was already overdue to be back in fully in service.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And, ooh, okay, so I have another question here. How many Monrovia Fire Department firefighters were deployed during the Bobcat fire?
100% everybody, inspectors and
Wow.
all of us. Yeah. So normally our firefighters work 24 hours a day, and then they have a day off or a couple of days off and then work another 24 hours. Every single person. So I think at the start, and our total strength is 47, including myself. So even our 40-hour staff was working either in the EOC or some form. I stayed there, I think, for about 2 weeks, just because I would go back from the fire to the incident command post down to Santa Fe Dam, back to my office, back to the EOC. So I kind of did that pretty much every day for a couple weeks. The firefighters, we had a couple on vacation. We got them back. We had two that were injured. I said that the one firefighter's wife was in an accident. So at some point, we kind of rotated a few people out that needed to go home for various emergencies or what have you, but everybody worked almost for 3 weeks straight. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
we do cancel vacations once in a while. We try not to, but this
Mhm.
one, it was more everybody's just whatever you need. We're good. We're just going to come in and help. We just want to be here, and so it was pretty
Yeah.
amazing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, we had
Um,
every single piece of equipment. The other thing is when the fire started, we actually had firefighters committed to the El Dorado fire, which was in San
oh, that's
Bernardino
great.
County. So it took a couple
Hmm.
days to get them back because obviously once they're committed there, that those communities need help out there. So got them back.
Hmm.
So we had a pre-position, which is kind of in staging. So they got deployed
Hmm.
right away. But we lost that crew up because the fire started up by Cogswell. So they actually ended up kind of working that whole backside of the two and in the I think Azusa Canyon Highway 39. So, but everybody was working
Yeah.
some part of the fire or running regular calls. We had all the, you know, pretty much any
Yeah.
routine admin business we put aside for that period of time. But, you know, we still
Yeah.
had people that were having heart attacks and cars were, you know, crashing into each other and things like that. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so that we still had that staffing occurring too.
Yeah. And then on top of that all, we're still very deep in the throes of the pandemic at that time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I
lot
guess
going on.
yeah, and then I'm going to ask another question we have from the community as well. But before I do that, I was just curious. I mean, how did the pandemic change the way that you would go about fighting that fire? I mean, was it pretty much, the same, or did it have any impact to how you had to handle that?
So as far as at the crew level or the company level, all the crews are supposed to, if they can't distance, so driving around in there, you know, be masked. I know that didn't always occur, but that's what was supposed to be occurring. They were hot and sweaty, and so I know that didn't always occur. But at
Hmm.
least at that level is pretty much standard. It just if you can't distance, put on a mask while you're, you know, in proximity. When you're out on the fire line, it's not practical, obviously, and
Hmm.
even some of the masks are, you know, combustible, so they wouldn't
Yeah.
wear masks, but they were spaced out on the fire line or whatever their activities were. At base camp, it was a lot more formalized, where when we did briefings, we all had 6-foot dots, just kind of like you see everywhere to step on. Temperature checks. We actually had a mobile COVID unit, so if symptoms came up, we would check people. We actually had a couple of our firefighters that were at the station that we actually deployed the mobile unit to check them. Fortunately, they came out negative. So there was a lot to manage. And we were very fortunate that we didn't lose anybody due to COVID during that
Yeah.
time. But we were also very lucky that we had this COVID unit that was attached to the fire so we could do all that testing really quick. So
Yeah.
it helped. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to hear. Yeah. Lots to manage.
Yeah.
Um, and then let's see, we'll go ahead and make this our last question. Um, are there opportunities for students specifically to volunteer with the fire department?
We do have some intern. You know, it depends on what kind of students. We have what's called the Yes Intern program, so that's for our high school group. It's limited in how many we can accept, and so we always get 1 to 2 a year from that program. We also have a lot of college interns, or I'll say students that have some level of interest that will come in and do a little bit of work with either our suppressions, like fire crews. More often that happens with our prevention. They're more interested in like fire engineering or, you know, building construction with how it relates to fire systems, things like that. So we see that all the time. And if somebody has that level of interest, the best way to get a hold of us is get on our website, look at who all of our emails are there. So if it's something related to fire inspection and you want to come in and volunteer, just email an inspector. If it's something that you're not sure about, you can email me and I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, that's all that we have as far as questions go. For everyone that's on the call, I just wanted to invite you, once we end the live, if you could go to the link in the public library's bio on Instagram to take the survey for this program. We would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here today, Chief Dover. You are absolutely a friend of the library. For folks that don't know, he's actually built a lot of the little free libraries in town, which I just discovered, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you again for always being so willing to partner with us. And I hope everyone, and you included, has a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, Stephanie. Bye.
Alrighty, thanks. Bye, everyone.